This lesson will help prepare you for section 6.3, which looks at exponent properties. So let's just dive right in, and I'm going to start using examples involving variables because that's ultimately where you'll be using these properties. So suppose you have the following expression, x cubed times x squared, and you're asked to simplify it. That means I'd like to write it with fewer symbols. Well, first I'm going to think about what x cubed means. It means x times x times x. And the x squared, well, the exponent's 2, so that means x times x, and you're being asked to multiply them. So if you look now at what you've got 3 x's from the x cubed and 2 x's from the x squared. Altogether, you have 5 x's. So it turns out that when you're multiplying with the same base, x and x, it turns out that you can add the exponents. And in general, we say x to the m times x to the n equals x to the m plus n. Notice that even though we're multiplying, we add the exponents. And that's because an exponent is essentially counting how many factors you have. So 3 factors, 2 more factors, altogether there's 5. Okay, so that's the first exponent property, and there could be trickier problems. For example, if I wrote 5y to the 4th times 2y to the 7th, well, I can go ahead and multiply the coefficients. 5 times 2 is 10, and then y to the 4th times y to the 7th, well, altogether there would be 4 plus 7, or 11 y's. So when I box this up, that is your first exponent property that you're responsible for knowing. All right, now let's clear that out because next we're going to look at another situation and you'll learn yet another exponent property. Okay, so suppose instead of x to the 3rd times x squared, suppose instead you were looking at the following. Let me write this neatly, x squared raised to the 3rd power. So let's think about what that means. Well, you're cubing x squared. So it's x squared multiplied by itself 3 times. And then what we just learned over here in green is that in this situation, you can add the exponents because there's 2 x's, 2 x's, and 2 x's, so you get x to the 6th. And in general, it turns out you can multiply those exponents. So anytime your exponents are stacked up like this, x to the m raised to the power of n, that's where you actually multiply the exponents. So I'm going to go ahead and box that one up as well because that's a second property of exponents that you need to know and be able to use. All right, so one more property that you're going to learn in this section involving exponents and multiplication, and that is, all right, let's get rid of all of this, and then let's go ahead and do this one in blue. So suppose you have x, y in parentheses, and you're, say, cubing that. Well, what does that mean? That means you're going to take xy and multiply it by itself 3 times. Now, because multiplication is commutative and associative, that's a fancy way of saying we can reorder this and put all 3 x's together and all 3 y's together, and then what we get is x cubed y cubed. So the rule in general is xy to the power of n. Turns out you have to raise both members inside the parentheses to the power of n. Kind of reminds me of the distributive property because you're essentially distributing the exponent over everything inside the parentheses. Technically, it's not called the distributive property, but I like to think of the connections between things I've already studied. So maybe that'll help you. Oh, nice big eraser. All right, so the last thing I want to go over in this video is combining those properties. So suppose you have 2x raised to the third power times 3x squared to the third power. Okay, there's a lot going on in this problem. First of all, the 2x cubed, well, the 2x is in parentheses, so I need to raise both things to the third power. So that's 2 cubed and x cubed. And similarly here, I have 3x squared in parentheses and an exponent outside. So I need to distribute that exponent, and I get 3 cubed times, if I take x squared and cube it, that's this rule in red, so I have to multiply those exponents. And then we can clean this up. 2 cubed, or 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And then let's go ahead and do the 3 cubed. That's 3 times 3 times 3, or 27. And then x cubed, x to the 6th. I'm now going to use the rule in green. 3 x's, 6 more x's. There we have 9. And the final step on this one would be to multiply 27 by 8. So 8 times 7 is 56. 16 plus 5 is 21. So the simplified answer here would be 216x to the 9th. Okay, so for your homework, what I want you to do is use the rules that were just explained to simplify the 6 expressions given. Okay, do your best with that. Have that ready for class next time.